Hi, Michael, can you hear me?
Hi, Jen. Yes, I can.
Great, thanks.
Recording in progress.
Hi, Carlos.
Oh, hi, Director Calderon Scott. How are you this evening?
I'm good.
Glad to hear.
Yeah. Am I the first one on?
I believe so. Are you gonna join us this Friday, Director Calderon Scott?
You know, I don't know if I was just copied as a CC or if they
Okay.
meant for me to be there. So I guess I'll check.
Okay.
I usually like to kind of keep their independence separate from mine.
No problem. We can brief you on it. That's not a
Okay.
problem. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi,
Director Rios. Good evening.
you've got a cheery smile.
Oh, okay. Well, it's the end of the day, last meeting. Michael, do we have a quorum?
We do have a quorum, Chair.
Then I will go ahead and get started. This meeting will proceed as, well, actually, first let
Wait,
me
you have 1
introduce the
minute.
meeting.
Oh, you have 1 more minute, actually.
Oh, one more minute?
Yeah,
Okay, let me know when we're ready.
will do. We're good to go. Go ahead, Chair.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome. I will call the October 20th, 2021 Water Quality and Distribution Committee meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. This meeting will proceed as a teleconference meeting in compliance with waivers to certain provisions of the Brown Act provided for under Assembly Bill 361 in relation to the proclaimed COVID-19 state of emergency. But the agenda and the notice posted to the authority's website notify members of the public that there will be no physical location from which members of the public may participate in this meeting. However, the agenda and the information on the authority's website provide members of the public with notice that they may hear the proceedings of this meeting by using the provided Zoom webinar link or call-in number. The notice and the agenda both also inform members of the public that they may submit public comments and other comments on agenda items in advance of the meeting through the public comment link on the authority's website, depositing comments in the authority's payment drop box located at the authority's administrative office, or mailing comments to the authority. Any such written comments will be read into the record at the appropriate portion of the meeting up to a limit of 3 minutes per comment. Additionally, members of the public may also make public comment on an item during the meeting by raising their hand via Zoom webinar or by clicking the raise hand button or via phone by pressing *9. With that, prior to the proceedings of this meeting and calling roll, I would like to make sure that all members can hear the proceedings well. Director Calderon-Scott?
I can hear you well.
Great. Director Martinez-Perez?
Yes, I can hear you.
Wonderful. With that, please call roll call, Michael.
Director Calderon-Scott,
Whoops, here.
Director Martinez-Perez,
Here.
Director Rios.
Here. Do any members of the committee present online for this meeting question the identity of any of the others who have noted their participation as members on this call? Hearing none, we will proceed to item 2. General Manager, are there any items to be added, withdrawn, or reordered in the agenda?
Chair Rios, there are no items to be added, withdrawn, or reordered in the agenda.
Thank you. Next, item 3, public comment. We will now hear public comments on items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Sweetwater Authority that are not on the agenda. Members of the public that would like to speak or non-agenda items, please raise your hand. Michael, are there any members of the public that would like to be heard or any written comments received?
We have no public comment, Chair.
Thank you, Michael. With that, we'll go to item 4, our action items for tonight. And the first one is 4A, consideration to extend the biological monitoring contract with Merkel and Association for the Richard A. Reynolds discharge permit. And with that, we will go ahead and ask if there are members of the public that would like to speak on this item 4A. Please raise your hand. Board Secretary, are there any members of the public that would like to be heard or any written comments received?
We have no public comment, Chair.
Thank you. With that, we would go to General Manager Quintero, who is there a staff presentation tonight?
Chair Rios, no, there's a verbal presentation only. The item for consideration for the committee is to recommend to the governing board to direct staff to negotiate a contract extension through December 31st, 2022 with Merkel and Associates for the Reynolds desalination facility discharge permit biological monitoring in an amount not to exceed $125,000. As background, a contract was awarded to Merkel back in February 2017 with option to renew annually. The budget approved back then was about slightly over 100,000 per year. And the current contract with Merkel expires in February. We're making this recommendation to extend one more year. Well, it's 10 months really through December 31st. Since we're in the process of renewing the NPDES permit, that's the discharge permit for the Reynolds desalination facility. So staff believes that it's good to keep the same consultant to help us with the monitoring until past the permit is renewed. The amount not to exceed is basically they perform monitoring, and the expenditures so far have been about $80,000 per month. And it really depends on how the tests come in. If we get a test that fails, then we're required to do more monitoring. So it's hard to pinpoint the exact amount, but we think the amount of not to exceed $125,000 is appropriate for this extension if approved by the governing board. So that pretty much summarizes my report, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And we also have staff participating if there's further questions from the committee.
Well, thank you for that report. And before I turn it over to questions for directors, I just wanted to say that it looks like it is just the extension for 10 months, and then we will be moving to the request for proposal, but that we would allow that time, as you said, to review the biological monitoring requirements during this time. So with that, I'll go ahead and ask Director Calderon-Scott if she has any questions.
Sure. I think that it's notable contract isn't due to expire until February 3rd, 22, and that staff has gotten really ahead of this. I think it's great and refreshing, so thank you. And while normally I would want to test the market to keep us competitive, I think that staff in their report and our general manager have made a good case for negotiating a contract extension with Merkel and Associates. For the various reasons noted, there were a number of them. I think that maintaining the continuity during the crucial issuance of the discharge permit, I think is good. It's also going to give, I think, staff time to get to know the new requirements under, a renewal of the contract. So that, I think, would make for a better RFP, a clearer RFP down the road. So I think there's a lot of reasons why this would be good to go with the alternative one. I'll see what others comment, but I like alternative one.
Wonderful. We will come back to you. But first I'll go ahead and move to Director Martinez Perez and see if she has any questions.
As of right now, I don't have any questions. I feel like things make sense.
Great.
Back to
Well,
you,
with
Chair.
that, thank you, Director. With that, I'll go ahead and ask Director Calderon Scott if she'd like to go ahead and make a motion.
Yes, I would. I'd love making a motion to support staff's alternative one recommendation. Do you need me to read that out?
Yes, why don't you read that?
Okay, alternative one is direct staff to negotiate a contract extension through December 31, 2022. I apologize for my dog. He's sick. He's got a cough. You probably hear him. Sorry. With Merkel and Associates, Inc., San Diego, California, for the Richard A. Reynolds Desalination Facility Discharge Permit, biological monitoring in an amount not to exceed $125,000. That's my motion.
And is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Director. So with that, if there is not any more discussion, I will go ahead and move to Michael to please take a roll call vote.
Director Calderon Scott,
Aye.
Director Martinez Perez,
Aye.
Director Rios.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. And Michael, I think we should go ahead and put this on consent calendar for the full board.
Thank you.
And with that, we would move to action item 4B, which is consideration of request for quotes for the traffic control service. And I will again ask the, well, first I need to check with the community and see if there is any speakers on 4B from the public. If there is, please raise your hand. Board Secretary, are there any members of the public that would like to be heard or any written comment?
We have no public comment, Chair.
Okay, then with that, we will go ahead and move to the General Manager Quintero and see if there is a staff presentation.
Thank you, Chair Rios. No, there's no staff presentation on this. It's similar to the previous item with a verbal report. And the item for consideration of the committee is to recommend to the governing board to direct staff to issue the traffic control services request for quotes as presented. This is RFQ looking for quotes to provide traffic control services support for our distribution department. And this is to provide all signs and flaggers as required to make sure that the work performed by our crews is done in a safe manner. The RFQ also includes a provision to provide a design of traffic control plans and also to assist staff with obtaining permits. These are all on-call contracts, so the vendors get paid for the work performed. And the staff memo includes the amount that staff has, the authority has spent on average $135,000 per year. There's a slight change from the last time this RFQ was issued. We're recommending to have a 2-year contract with an option for 3 annual renewals. This is slightly different from the previous RFQ where it was renewed annually. We think that by having a 2-year contract, it would reduce staff time to reissue the RFQ, and also it gives the vendors a longer period of time to hopefully get more competitive prices. So that's why we're making this recommendation. We have also identified a list of vendors that provide traffic control services, and the staff will reach out to them and make sure that they receive it and they have all the information they need to be able to provide quotes. We do have a director of distribution on the call. If there's any questions or if I can answer them, I'd be happy to do so as well.
Thank you so very much. This is an item that came before this committee with the 3 of us back in March of, I think it was March 3rd of 21, earlier this year. And then it went for the full board that moved it forward as well to rebid in the fall, which we're in. So,
Right.
So that's another really great thing to see these coming back, in a timely manner. So I just wanted to mention that. And I think that the request is to direct staff to issue the traffic control services RFQ, but is there also a request for this board, or is it the full board to put input on that RFQ, document?
The board is, welcome to provide any comments and direct staff to incorporate them. The recommendation from staff is to direct staff to issue the RFQ as presented. But certainly, there's board input. We and direction. We will update it as required.
Okay, wonderful. Then with that, I will go ahead and go to the Director Calderon-Scott, for any questions of staff.
Yes, I think a little background is helpful. Also, just a little recollection, because normally a project like this doesn't even need to come to us for the RFP. This was one of the early projects that started to come to us as we looked at to develop and strengthen a local business participation plan. And this was one where, looking back at some of the history, and I'll try to be brief, normally these services fell under the 5-year on-call. And we had 2 local firms that within our district area that were doing the work for under a bigger contract. And approximately 15 years ago, they pulled out this portion of the work and treated it separately. And at that time, it's when the current bidder got it. So he got it for 5 years and another 5 years and another 5 years. And so we were really looking at doing 2 things, 3 things really: keeping us competitive, so that we could really help build capacity, open it up, but also look for local participation, which would be consistent with our emergency resolution that we were going to support small business, and then developed into our small business program. And so we looked at the different compositions, the informal contract, formal contract, and how could we get more participation, where this was one example where we did better before than over the last 15 years. And so it went out, and it was when we were first starting. And so we really didn't have the outcome that we had hoped. But staff was still, developing their outreach efforts. So I think their outreach, so a good part of this, why it's coming to us is because they have incorporated some of these outreach efforts that, that we encouraged, that the board encouraged and wanted to see. One of them, I guess so then this will lead to a question, because we went short term because we didn't really feel great about giving it to the same business that had already had it 3 times around. And we wanted to have it more competitive. And so, that's why we went a shorter term. So now looking at it, I think staff is doing a much better job in their outreach. And I think that they address that in here. And so I do want to compliment staff, not just, for all that they're setting in place for the outreach, but also that they've come to us early. And not like before where it was at the last, at the last minute. This was before our interim GM and our new GM, and really didn't give us time to, didn't give staff time to do much. But I did have, so that's the background. So the question that I did have is, as I looked at the, the actual request for quote, is that I couldn't really tell. This does not seem like a low bid. Is this a low bid contract?
If I may, Chair Rios, address Director Calderon's
Yes,
question.
please.
Yes, we did include the basis consideration, the basis for award, and let me find that for you. I know because we did have that.
And I did see it, and that's really why I'm questioning, is because it wasn't clear to me. It also addresses qualifications. So there are a number of things there. So then my question was going to be, if it appears not to be low bid, I think that that's one factor. But there seems to also be the qualifications where it asks them for, a number of other things. So then my question was, what's going to be the selection criteria? Because I didn't see any selection criteria here.
The way we structure this is that the award is based on cost, provided that the vendor can meet all the authority's requirements. So, insurance requirements, that they can respond within the identified time during emergencies, and that they can provide the services as requested. So that's the basis for award. And I'm trying to find, I know it was included because I did read it.
Okay, because it does also state, like you mentioned, evidence of insurance. It says statement of bidders, qualifications, and references. Right. So I would think that it would be some kind of appointment system, contract documents, periods of performance, that you would look at some of those other things. So to me, then, it's not a clear cost only, which would then go to other qualifications. So then how will you treat it? Is this an opportunity for our local vendor? Because I think it names like 5 of them and 1 is local. So all things equal, like say if number 1 and number 2 were really kind of ranked equal, is there going to be a consideration incorporated in here for our national city local firm?
We do not have that. This is structured more as a public works service contract where, we identify a series of requirements and we expect that vendor to meet those requirements. So if the lowest cost meets those requirements, then we would make a recommendation to award. If a reference doesn't check, then we could determine that vendor to be non-responsive. And then we could move to the next bidder, to the second low bidder, and make sure that everything's complied. We can certainly take a look at this and make sure that it's well identified as to how this selection process works. But for the most part, these public works services are based on cost, on low cost, basically, provided that the vendor meets all the requirements.
So General Manager, would it be okay to, I don't know if Carl may have something also to contribute?
Yes, yeah, I certainly will reach out if you go to page 18 of the agenda, Michael, please. Down there, consideration of award. That's the statement that we included. Director Calderon, it says a contract will be awarded on the basis of cost in contractor meeting all requirements herein listed in the RFQ.
But see, nowhere in here does it say that it's going to be judged ultimately based on cost. So maybe we need BBK to look at this wording, because as we're looking at other consultant contracts too, we're looking at criteria, but yet we're going to be asking them, for their rate sheets, for example.
Usually with professional services, that is the case. With services of this sort, the basis is cost. The lowest cost and the contract that can meet those requirements, staff would make a recommendation to approve the contract. If this is something where we get different direction and have a different type of weighing of the criteria, we can certainly look at that and present it to the board for consideration.
Okay.
But a lot of these services, similar to construction, is done on a cost. The cost is the determining factor, assuming the contractor can meet all the requirements. We would have to look at with board direction at a way to evaluate different factors in making the decision, but on this is strictly cost.
Can I ask Director Rios?
Yes, please.
Director Calderon Scott, I get my question, I guess, to you. I want to understand, are you saying that it needs to be more obvious?
Yes.
That this contract will be based on cost? It's not that you're saying that you want different evaluation criteria. You just want it to be very clear that we're going off cost?
Yes.
So
Yes.
if the sentence then, so the sentence is a contract will be awarded on the basis of cost. So would you want it to say something along those, like every contract needs to meet all requirements, or contract will be granted to the lowest bid? Like, is that?
Yeah, well, I don't want to, dictate the language. I want to know that BBK looked at that, because I have been looking at language, and this seems a bit different. And that's why I'm asking the question. I'm just trying to be proactive, because there's been a lot of discussion around these various contracts at how we're looking at criteria and cost. And I just wasn't very clear on this. I mean, I looked at it. I had my husband look at it. He's a purchasing contracting guy with NASCO, and he didn't see it as clear either, because I wondered if I was missing something.
We can certainly look at this and clarify it, Director Calderon Scott, and make sure that there's no ambiguity, if you will, that the basis of award is going to be on low cost, provided that the contractor meets all the requirements. Does that answer your question?
If that's
Okay.
and obviously I don't speak for the whole board, but if that's their desire, because for example, if they say, well, no, if it's in a point system, the way they treat some of the other contracts, then, they might say, we want to give 5 points if they're local, so that if all things being equal, a local might get this contract.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
so
But,
you're
I
asking.
don't want to delay it.
Mhm.
I don't want
Right.
to delay it. And I thought staff did a good job. I just didn't think that it was, to me, it wasn't clear that this is a low bid contract. And I've seen these type of contracts that aren't low bid.
So if you want to assure that is in this, because we are being asked to, put input in this document. If you want to add that to your, to a motion, I think that would be appropriate, but,
Okay,
so that would be what either is vote on to go forward or not.
Right.
Because that is your prerogative to go ahead and put some input.
If I may, Chair Rios, maybe, seeking clarification on the basis of award. I think that's, if I understand Director Calderon Scott, it's seeking clarity on the basis of award.
yes.
And with the committee's direction, we can ask the board to provide that direction and make the appropriate changes if that's what the board desires.
Okay, so then this would be a recommended action item, wouldn't it, Chair Rios?
Well, we could move this forward. With the amendment, it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we can move it forward with an amendment if it does get the majority number of votes as a consent, and then, it can still be pulled from the consent if folks don't agree with this. Is that correct? Do you know, General Manager?
Certainly, and these are valid points that could put on consent, and we'll be ready to have these answers and clarification for the full board regarding the concerns raised by Director Calderon Scott.
Great, thank you. And since Carl is here, if you'd like to add anything, Carl, before we move to a motion.
Carl or
Questions?
Nate? Carl?
Well, Nate's feeling a little under the weather, so let me just say that I think the general manager summarized it really well. It's a fairly straightforward public works contract, so, but we will do our best to address Director Calderon Scott's concerns.
Okay, great.
Right.
So General Manager, then do you have it documented what that motion would, how that motion would read if Director Calderon Scott went ahead and made that motion? Do you have that, as you stated, about seeking clarification?
Yes, direct staff to issue the traffic control services RFQ with clarification regarding basis of award.
Okay. Okay.
As directed by the governing board.
That's acceptable.
Okay, is there any more questions from either Director Calderon Scott or Director Martinez Perez?
I just have a quick question, Chair.
Yes, please.
So I know that it said that the RFP, yeah, PQ.
For quotes.
The RFQ, it's generally open because it's difficult to estimate. Is that generally how it works? Is that what happened last time? I was just wondering.
These are with on-call contracts. It's hard to gauge. We have an estimate based on prior year's averages. So our crews carry some traffic control, and they can do very minor if it's a fairly routine project. The issue becomes when we have emergencies and there's limitations as to how many hours our crews can work. So we rather focus our crews on doing repairs and seek the support of companies or vendors to provide that traffic control. So it is hard to really gauge what that amount is. So the best we can do is estimate the level of effort, and that is included on page 23. If you go to page 23, Michael, please, of the document. So these are the bid items, and this is an estimate of the level of effort, Director Martinez Perez, and then the vendors identify a rate and just multiply it by the estimate effort and come up with a total. So
Got
that's the basis that we would use to award a contract. But in the RFQ, there's like minimum 1 hour response time.
Got it.
So we want to make sure that when we ask a vendor to be there because we have an emergency, that they're there within the hour.
Yeah, of course.
If they're not responding, then that's grounds for non-performance, and we can, reevaluate and look for a vendor that meets those conditions.
So I guess my question was like, was this the same system that was used, last
I-
time that we asked?
I would defer that to maybe Nathan, but I would assume so, yes. This is pretty standard, but Nate, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, we've used this similar estimates process and how we gauge the and compare the different vendors. The not to exceed amount of 135,000 is based on certain projects we've identified in the budget, as well as a combination of that annual averages that what we've seen over the past years.
Cool, thank you. And I have one more, and I guess it's in
Yes.
regarding the motion. I guess I want to make sure that the motion does not imply that we would want to change the consideration for award. So I would support simply checking with BBQ that the sentence is good enough, and then go from that. I do not want to recommend creating a system for a rubric or award, or because I feel like that adds layers. So I want to make sure that we're on this, that the motion is stating that and not adding multiple layers. So does that make sense?
Well, I think you would have to probably have a substitute motion, because that's a different motion than what Director Calderon Scott had mentioned.
Is it though? That's why I guess I want to ask Director
Yeah.
Calderon Scott, is that
Oh.
what you meant? Because I thought you just wanted to check with BBQ. Do you want this sentence to be checked with BBQ, Director Calderon Scott? Or do you want the consideration of
It on the
award to be
motion.
changed?
Yeah, well, I definitely want to know that it's cleared with BBK and that we're going far enough and clear enough in our language so that it's not confusing, that if it's a low bid, that
But
it's
that's clear.
clearly reflected. But what I was saying is I can't speak, for the rest of the board in terms of, I know that with this contract in the past, local participation was important to everyone. So whether, they even had that 10%, remember, which I was uncomfortable with adding, that we would give them they could go be 10% higher and we would award them the contract. So, I was uncomfortable with that. And this is a pretty independent board, so I'm not going to speak for them. I'm interested in the language. And at some point, I think we need to, outreach was the first effort. And I think that we're making a good, strong first effort on the outreach. But I think the next one that the board has talked about has been looking at, depending on how the contracts fall, looking at the criteria, specific criteria for specific contracts, whether they're informal, formal, et cetera. I don't think we're there yet. I think that should be a separate discussion because it would involve more than one contract. But, I can't.
Director Calderon Scott, I recall, I guess, that we had spent a lot of time on talking both about criteria and low bid. I know that was something very important to you, and this committee spent a lot of time on it, and then it went to full board. And I think you even had a special meeting with staff about your and that we had come back with a lot of information that you had suggested.
Right.
So what I would like to suggest here, because it feels like we're going back again to revisit things that we've already addressed to some degree, I would like to go ahead and make a motion to accept the alternative as it stands and not put it on consent, but to put it on action And if you like to have the full board's input, I think, and have staff come back with the questions that you're asking about the clarification on lowest bid, I think at that point, it could be further discussed with the full board.
Okay.
If you agree with that.
Sure, I could agree with that.
Chair Rios, may I suggest maybe recommend alternative 2 may be appropriate if Yugi, so.
Okay.
So direct
Yes.
staff to issue, so the committee
Absolutely.
recommends that the governing board direct staff to issue the traffic control service RFQ with modifications as directed. And those modifications are based on the discussion that we've been having here.
Yes,
So
that would be
I
perfect.
think that's the segue to help us address that. So there's modifications coming.
Right.
And we'll be ready to address these, for the full board and get further direction from the board.
Sorry, I'm
That's-
confused. What are the modifications? I don't see how checking in with BBK is a modification. Is that the only thing, or are we actually changing something?
That would be the modification could potentially be, if directed by the board, is clarify the basis of award, Director Martinez Perez.
Clarify the basis of a board. Again, we're not actually changing anything. We're just checking to make sure that the sentence about cost is appropriate.
That, yes, if there's a rewording, then that would, that would be considered a
Okay.
modification. And maybe BB&K says that that's appropriate, and then there's
Then we're good.
the governing board will change the direction to staff and adopt it as presented without any modifications. But I think at least recommending with the modifications, I think this helps us present this to the board and have the board consider these potential modifications, and then provide
Okay.
direction to staff.
Sounds good.
But there still would be that option, as you stated, that it would be to just issue the traffic control services
Okay.
RFQ without modification. So that discussion could be held with the full board, correct?
That's, yes, Chair,
Okay.
yes. Mhm.
Okay. All right. Well, that sounds good. Well, with that, I will go ahead and make that motion for alternative 2, which is to direct staff to issue the traffic control services RFQ with modifications as directed by the governing board. And do I hear a second?
Second,
Okay, so with that, if there's no further discussions, or is there any further clarifications from staff, or are we ready to move forward to the vote? Sounds like there's nothing. Okay, so with that, Michael, would you please take the roll call vote?
Director Calderon Scott,
aye.
Director Martinez Perez,
Aye.
Director Rios.
Aye,
The motion passes unanimously.
great. Thank you for that. And it looks like that was our last action item. So we move to director's comments. And we will go ahead and start with Director Calderon Scott.
No comment.
Okay, all right. Director Martinez Perez.
No comment.
Okay. And I don't have any comments as well. I'm glad we were able to go fully vet these items, and we will see them again when they come back to the full board next week. So staff will be able to present more information at that time. So with that, I will go ahead and say that the next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, November 3rd. Gosh, we're already going to be in November at
Yeah.
6:30 p.m. And with no further business, we will adjourn. Thank you.
Okay.
Good night, everyone.
Yes.
Good night.
Aye.